Right now, in the mountains above a coastal Japanese town that has already survived one of the deadliest earthquakes in recorded human history, a wildfire is burning through 200 hectares of forest, and the ground beneath that burning mountain is still shaking. Two disasters, same place, 3 days apart. And the Japanese government's own meteorological agency has issued a formal advisory warning that the earthquake, magnitude 7, 4 to 7, 7, depending on which instrument you trust, may not be the largest one coming. The advisory is active until April the 27th. The fires started April 22nd, and the people being evacuated from the smoke on the mountain slopes above Otsuchi are the same people who were told to evacuate to those mountain slopes 3 days earlier to escape a potential tsunami from the sea below. But that is not even the real story. The real story is that these two disasters are not coincidences stacked on top of each other by random misfortune. They are signatures of a single connected system, a coastline, a tectonic boundary, an atmosphere, a climate that is under stress from multiple directions simultaneously. And what the data shows when you look at all of it together, rather than each event in isolation, is that Iwate Prefecture's northeast coast is not experiencing a bad week. It is experiencing a convergence of seismic energy released from one of the most dangerous fault boundaries on Earth, atmospheric conditions driven by disrupted circulation patterns producing historic dryness, and the accumulated geological and human vulnerability of a community that has been through catastrophe before and rebuilt and is now being asked to absorb two simultaneous emergencies with the same emergency response infrastructure, the same self-defense forces helicopters, the same evacuation centers, the same roads. The question is not whether those systems are strong enough for one disaster. They are. The question is whether they are strong enough for both at the same time. And that question does not have a comfortable answer. Let us begin with the ground, because the ground moved first. At 4:52 in the afternoon on April 20th, 2026, a Monday, 2 days before the fires ignited, a rupture began approximately 100 kilometers off the coast of Iwate Prefecture at a depth of 35 kilometers beneath the seafloor of the western Pacific Ocean. The Japan Meteorological Agency measured it at magnitude 7. 7, the United States Geological Survey, measured it at magnitude 7, 4. The global Centroid moment tensor project, which models the three-dimensional geometry of seismic ruptures, assigned it a moment magnitude of 7. 5. The precise number matters less than what those numbers describe. A rupture area estimated at 70 kilometers by 65 kilometers, a patch of broken rock roughly the size of the entire island of Oahu, with a maximum slip of 4. 735 meters at the hypocenter. 4.735 meters. That is the height of a double-decker bus. That is how far the seafloor moved in 12 seconds. The observed source time function, the instrument record of how energy was released during the rupture, shows the greatest phase of seismic moment release occurring within the first 10 seconds of initiation. 10 seconds to move a seafloor the area of a major island by nearly 5 meters. The ocean moved with it. The Japan Meteorological Agency immediately issued a tsunami warning for Iwate Prefecture, the Pacific coast of Aomori Prefecture, and the central part of Hokkaido's Pacific coast. Warnings, not advisories, warnings, for waves forecast to reach up to 3 meters. That is 10 feet. The screens across northeastern Japan lit up. NHK flashed in English, "Tsunami, evacuate, don't turn back." Anchors on every broadcast channel urged residents to remember March 11th, 2011, because on this same coast, from the same subduction zone, a magnitude 9. Zero earthquake had once done exactly what this earthquake was doing now, except with 200 times the energy. Evacuation orders went out to 82,111 households. That is 175 and 157 people across 13 cities, 21 towns, and 6 villages spanning Hokkaido, Aomori, Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima prefectures. People who live on this coast know what those words mean. They know the routes, they know the hills. They know because some of them remember 2011, and some of them lost people they loved in 2011, and all of them have grown up under the weight of knowing that the subduction zone beneath this ocean can, without warning, release energy that erases coastlines. The tsunami came. It was smaller than feared. The highest wave measured was 80 centimeters at Kuji Port in northern Iwate. Miyako recorded 40 centimeters. Hachinohe in Aomori recorded 30 centimeters. The warnings were lifted by 11:50 that night. 6 people were injured, 2 seriously. 39 buildings were damaged in Aomori Prefecture. A road was damaged in Ishinomaki. 200 households lost power in Hiraizumi. The damage was real, but it was not 2011. And the people came down from the hills and went home and exhaled. And then the Japan Meteorological Agency issued something that is not issued often. Under a system put in place in 2022, specifically because of the history of this coastline, the JMA activated what is formally called the Off the Coast of Hokkaido and Sanriku Subsequent Earthquake Advisory. The advisory covers 182 municipalities from Hokkaido down to Chiba Prefecture. It informs residents that the probability of a megaquake, defined as an earthquake of magnitude 8, 0 or greater, has risen from its background rate of 0.0, 1% per week to 1% per week. That is a tenfold increase. 10 times the normal chance that the fault beneath the ocean cracks again, larger, and sends a wave that is not 80 centimeters. The Ofunado fire was in the same Iwate Prefecture, on the same Sanriku coast, driven by the same extreme dryness and wind conditions. It earned its own disaster designation. The national government eventually labeled it a severe disaster, meaning the national government subsidized half the restoration costs. Now they have invoked the same law again, 14 months later, for a fire in the same prefecture. And this time, the fire arrived into a region already running active seismic emergency protocols. Let us go to the ground level of Otsuchi and meet the people inside this number. By Thursday afternoon, April 23rd, evacuation orders had been issued to 2,488 people from 1,229 households. Of those, approximately 220 people were sheltering in evacuation centers, a gymnasium, a community building, somewhere that is not the home they were ordered to leave. One of them is a 61-year-old woman who told reporters she was surprised that fires broke out in 2 locations simultaneously, and that she is worried about the condition of her home. She did not say this dramatically. She said it the way people say things when they are sitting in a gymnasium for the second time in 3 days, wondering whether anything will be left when they are allowed to go back. Every elementary school, junior high school, and high school in Otsuchi was closed Thursday. The children of this town, who already carry the memory of what this coast does in its worst moments, some of them were born after 2011 and grew up hearing what was lost and have spent their entire conscious lives on a coastline with a megaquake advisory attached to it. Those children spent Thursday away from school in the smoke of a mountain fire, waiting. Now the seismology. Because the geological context of what is happening in Iwate this week extends back not decades, but centuries. And what the geological record shows is not reassuring. The subduction zone, where the Pacific plate slides beneath the Okhotsk microplate along the Japan Trench, has been the site of catastrophic earthquakes in 869, in 1896, in 1933, and in 2011. The 869 Sanriku earthquake, documented in Japanese historical chronicles and confirmed by tsunami deposit analysis in the sediment record, generated a wave that geologists estimate reached similar heights to the 2011 event. The pattern of great earthquakes along this boundary suggests recurrence intervals that range from several hundred years for the largest events to decades for significant, magnitude 7 to 8 events. What the April 2026 sequence shows, looked at in that longer context, is this. A fault boundary that has been accumulating stress since 2011 released a significant but not catastrophic amount of energy on April 20th. That release did not reset the fault. It adjusted it. And the advisory issued by the JMA acknowledges explicitly that the probability of a larger event in the following week is now 10 times the background level. This is not speculation. This is the model that seismologists built precisely because this pattern, a significant event followed shortly after by an even larger one, has occurred before on this exact coast, and the death toll the second time was measured in the tens of thousands. Here is what the connected systems reveal when you step back far enough to see all of them at once. The tectonic system is awake and has been signaling its stress since November 2025, 162 foreshocks before the April main shock alone, plus a December 2025 magnitude 7. A 6th event, 140 kilometers to the north, plus aftershocks continuing through this week, the strongest reaching magnitude 5. 6, as of April 23rd, that is the seismic layer. The atmospheric layer sits directly above it. Record low precipitation in the region. Extreme dryness documented since at least the 2020 Ofunado fire, blocking high-pressure systems holding dry continental air over the Kitakami Mountains at a time of year when fire danger is already at its seasonal peak in northeastern Japan. The local weather observatory warned of dry air and strong winds in Otsuchi before the fires ignited. The fires ignited anyway, 2 of them, simultaneously, or near enough, that emergency services were split between 2 burning fronts from the first hours of the incident. And then there's the human layer, a community of 11,172 people, aging, economically fragile from 15 years of post-tsunami reconstruction and demographic decline, running on the same emergency infrastructure for the second time in 72 hours. The seismic system is stressed, the atmospheric system is stressed, the human system is stressed. These are not separate stresses. They compound each other. An evacuation that would be manageable under one set of conditions becomes harder when the roads you need were damaged in an earthquake 2 days ago. A wildfire that would be controllable under normal response conditions becomes harder when the helicopters and personnel have been running continuous operations since Monday. This is not a theory. This is what cascading disasters look like in real time. The historical anchor for what this coastline risks in its worst moments sits 15 years back and still shakes the ground when you name it. March 11th, 2011, a magnitude 9. 0 earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan, and the fourth most powerful in the world since modern seismography began, ruptured the fault boundary that is currently elevated to Megaquake advisory status. The rupture zone extended 500 kilometers in length, 200 kilometers in width. The energy released was equivalent to approximately 200 times the April 20th earthquake. The seafloor rose by meters in seconds. The ocean rose with it. The advisory runs until April 27th, 2026. It is still active today. And here is the detail that makes a seismologist's voice go quiet when they explain it. This advisory was designed precisely because the 2011 magnitude 9, 0, Tohoku earthquake was preceded by a magnitude 7, 2 foreshock 2 days earlier, 2 days. The system was built to catch exactly this pattern. And the pattern is active right now. Here is where this story becomes genuinely alarming, because the April 20th earthquake was not an isolated event that emerged from silence. A foreshock sequence for this rupture began in November 2025. 162 earthquakes measuring magnitude 4. 0 or higher preceded the April main shock, including 5 events measuring magnitude 6. 0 or above, the strongest of which reached magnitude 6. 8. That sequence built for 5 months. 5 months of the plate boundary signaling its stress, of the Pacific plate advancing at its relentless pace of 7, 9 to 9. 2 centimeters per year, the width of a smartphone, moving every year, never stopping, compressing the locked interface that separates it from the Okhotsk microplate above, before releasing the April 20th rupture. And in December 2025, a separate magnitude, 7. 6 earthquakes struck approximately 140 kilometers north-northwest of the April event, near the Shimokuta Peninsula, also triggering a Megaquake advisory, also rattling the same infrastructure, also sending the same population to the same high ground. This coastline has been shaking for months, and now it is burning. 2 days after the earthquake. 2 days after 175,157 people were ordered to evacuate coastal areas, and the Megaquake advisory went active. 2 days after people came back home and tried to return to ordinary life in the shadow of a warning that has not been lifted. At 1:55 in the afternoon on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026, an emergency call came in from the Kazuchi district of Otsuchi, Iwate Prefecture, reporting fire on a mountain slope. By 4:20 that same afternoon, a second fire had ignited in the Kirikiri area, approximately 10 kilometers from the first. 2 fires, same day, same town. And the town is Otsuchi, a coastal mountain community of 11,572 people, situated precisely where the Kitakami Mountains meet the Sanriku coast, the same coast that the Megaquake advisory is still monitoring, the same coast that the April 20th tsunami warning covered, the same coast where the 2011 tsunami wave obliterated the harbor and destroyed everything in the lower town, and drove the survivors up into the mountains that are now burning. Think about what 200 hectares of burning mountain terrain means for emergency response, when that emergency response system is simultaneously managing the aftermath of a major earthquake and an active Megaquake advisory. The Self-Defense Forces helicopters that are water dropping on the Otsuchi fire are the same self-defense forces that deployed to the Iwate garrison during the tsunami alert 2 days ago. The fire departments from across Iwate Prefecture that have been mobilized to fight the blaze, personnel brought in from cities across the region, are the same emergency infrastructure that was activated Monday for seismic response. The Iwate Prefectural government that set up its disaster response headquarters for the wildfire and invoked the Disaster Relief Act had set up a crisis management center 48 hours earlier for the earthquake. The systems are not resting between emergencies. They are running continuously. And they are running for a population that is also not rested. A population that spent Monday evening fleeing from water and spent Wednesday evacuating from fire, and has not had a day of ordinary life in between. The Disaster Relief Act. It is worth pausing to explain exactly what this means, because the invocation of this law is not a bureaucratic formality. When the Iwate Prefectural government formally invoked the Disaster Relief Act for the Otsuchi wildfire, it triggered a legal mechanism first established in 1947 to ensure that disaster costs, shelter, food, medical care, emergency supplies, do not destroy the financial capacity of a local government while it is simultaneously trying to run the relief operation. Invoking this law shifts the cost burden from the town and prefecture to the combined weight of national and prefectural governments. Japan has applied this law to wildfires only a handful of times in its modern history. They applied it to the Ofunato wildfire in February 2025, when that fire became Japan's largest in 50 years, burning 2,900 hectares, destroying 171 structures, killing 1 person, forcing 4,596 people to evacuate, and burning for 12 days before it was suppressed. In Miyako, just north of Otsuchi along the same Sanriku coast, the wave reached 40 5 meters, the height of a 12-story building. It traveled at 700 kilometers per hour. Residents of Sendai had 8 to 10 minutes from the shaking to prepare. In Otsuchi, the harbor was obliterated. The town lost its mayor. The tsunami covered approximately half the entire municipality. Every fishing boat but 30 of 650 was destroyed. The sea farm industry that had sustained the community for generations was erased in minutes. The official final count for all of Tohoku: 15,901 confirmed dead, 2,519 missing and presumed dead, 18,500 lives lost or unaccounted for. The cost to Japan alone was estimated at $220 billion. 98% of the damage was attributed not to the earthquake, but to the water it sent. And now the Japan Meteorological Agency has formally declared that the probability of another event on this same fault boundary is 10 times its normal level. The monitoring is in place. Detection is possible, prediction is not. And that careful distinction, stated calmly in official language, is the most alarming sentence in this entire story. Otsuchi rebuilt. That is the fact that needs to sit alongside all the other facts. The town built a seawall, raised the coastal ground, moved some neighborhoods to higher elevation, and a man named Itaru Sasaki put an old disconnected telephone booth in his garden on a hill above town and called it the wind phone, where people could come and speak one-way conversations to the people they lost. More than 30,000 people have made the journey to that hillside since 2011. The hill is above the harbor and above the low-lying districts that the tsunami covered, which means the hill is in the mountain zone, which means the hill is in the direction of the fires that are burning this week. That is not a metaphor. That is geography. The place where the town goes to grieve is now in the evacuation zone. The community that got told to go to the hills when the earthquake hit Monday and got told to leave the hills when the fire started. Wednesday is not a population in panic. Japan's disaster response culture is extraordinary, structured, disciplined, built on decades of catastrophic experience and the institutional knowledge of what happens when it fails. The Iwate Prefectural government activated its disaster response headquarters within hours. The self-defense forces moved. Firefighters from Miyagi Prefecture were requested and dispatched. The Disaster Relief Act was invoked. The national government's Crisis Management Center, activated for the earthquake Monday, continued running. The mayor of Otsuchi, Kozo Hirano, stood in front of cameras Thursday and told reporters the situation is changing by the minute. That is accurate. And it is accurate in a way that no emergency management system, however sophisticated, can fully resolve, because the situation changing by the minute on a mountain that is actively burning, in a region under active Megaquake advisory, in a community simultaneously running wildfire evacuation protocols, while the aftershock sequence from Monday's magnitude 7. 5 event continues to rattle buildings is not a situation that any single response system was designed to handle all at once. By Thursday afternoon, the fire had consumed more than 200 hectares, 2 million square meters, the area of 2,800 soccer fields pressed together into a single burning zone on slopes so steep that fire departments describe the Kitakami Mountains as natural chimneys for fire spread. Flames had come within 100 meters of residential homes. 7 buildings were destroyed. In some locations, firefighters were holding lines against a fire front, advancing toward neighborhoods that are themselves elevated above the coastline precisely because of tsunami risk. The same elevation that keeps those neighborhoods safe from water makes them harder to protect from fire. The terrain that was the solution to 2011 is part of the problem in 2026. The irony of that is not lost on the people who chose to build their homes on that hillside. They made the best decision available to them with the information they had. They rebuilt on higher ground because the sea was the threat they understood, and now the ground above them is burning. What the atmospheric science tells us about why this fire happened here and now is the same story as the Ofunado fire 14 months ago, only arriving faster and in a more compressed context. The winter of 2024 to 2025 was Japan's hottest on record. The precipitation deficits along the Sanriku coast, documented from Ofunado's record-breaking 5 millimeters of February rainfall in 2025, a number that shattered the previous record of 4. 4 millimeters set in 1967 reflect a regional drying trend that researchers at the University of Tokyo's Atmosphere and Ocean Research Institute connect to the interaction of continental cold air masses with a warmer Pacific Ocean. The jet stream's increasing tendency to hold blocking high-pressure systems over northeastern Japan for extended periods means the windows of extreme fire risk, dry, windy days without precipitation, are not shorter than historical norms, they are longer, and the fuel loads on the mountain slopes of Iwate have been building during those longer dry windows. Forest fire risk in Japan has been elevated for the February through April window for several consecutive years. The fires in that window have been getting larger. The Ofunado fire was Japan's largest in 50 years. The Otsuchi fires have started under the same conditions in the same region 14 months later, and this time they started on top of an active seismic emergency. Scientists are careful to say, and their caution is honest, that no individual weather event can be attributed entirely to climate change. But that careful language carries its own warning, because what the careful language describes, when you read across multiple papers, multiple datasets, multiple decades of records from the Sanriku coast, is directional. The trend moves toward more extreme dryness in the fire season window, more intense blocking events, longer periods without precipitation during the weeks when fire danger peaks. And when those atmospheric conditions land on the same geographic area as an active seismic sequence, on a coastline, managing dual emergency responses, in a community with aging infrastructure and limited redundancy, the compounding is not theoretical. It is operational. It is happening now, in real time, on April 23rd and 2026 in Otsuchi, Iwate Prefecture, Japan. Here is what the next week looks like if the data continues on its current trajectory. The Megaquake advisory runs until April 27th. That means 4 more days, during which the Japan Meteorological Agency considers the probability of a magnitude 8, 0 or greater earthquake to be 10 times elevated above background. During those same 4 days, 2,588 people remain under evacuation orders from the wildfire, which, as of Thursday, had no clear forecast for containment. The aftershock sequence from the April 20th, magnitude 7, 5 event continues, 17 aftershocks of magnitude 4. 0 or greater had occurred by April 23rd, with the strongest reaching magnitude 5. 6. Aftershocks in the magnitude 5 range are felt as significant shaking. They occur without warning. They can trigger landslides on mountain slopes that have been destabilized, slopes that are currently on fire, where the vegetation holding the soil is burning away, where helicopter operations are underway, where fire lines are being held by firefighters standing on terrain that is simultaneously at elevated seismic risk. This is what cascading disaster risk looks like when you trace all the threads. The question that the JMA's Megaquake advisory forces onto the table is the one that seismologists speak about with deliberate precision, because the uncertainty is real and the stakes are so high. Is the April 20th earthquake a foreshock? The history of this fault boundary is explicit, the magnitude 9. 0. Tohoku earthquake of 2011 was preceded by a magnitude 7, 2 foreshock 2 days before the main shock. The advisory system was built precisely around that precedent. The April 20th event occurred in waters off Iwate Prefecture. The 2011 main shock epicenter was approximately 70 kilometers east of the Yoshika Peninsula in Miyagi. They are not the same location, but they are on the same fault system. And the foreshock sequence leading to April 20th, 162 earthquakes above magnitude 4. 0 over 5 months represents a level of seismic preparation that seismologists do not routinely dismiss. Nobody is saying a magnitude 9, 0 is coming. What the advisory says, precisely and honestly, is that the probability of a magnitude 8, 0 or greater, is 1% this week compared to 0, 1% in a normal week. That difference, 0. 1% to 1% sounds small. It is tenfold. And on this coast, with 2011 15 years in the memory of everyone who lives here, tenfold is not a number people hear calmly. The people in the evacuation shelters in Otsuchi tonight are sitting with all of this. The woman in her 60s, who told reporters she was surprised the fires broke out in 2 locations. The 220 people sleeping in gymnasiums away from their homes. The children whose schools were closed, who do not know when they will go back to class. The firefighters from Miyagi, who drove to a prefecture they may never have visited before, to hold lines on a burning mountain above a town that is also managing seismic aftershocks. The mayor who told cameras the situation is changing by the minute. All of them are inside a convergence that the data predicted in general terms. More fire risk, continuing seismic risk, aging infrastructure, compressed emergency response capacity, without predicting these specific days, this specific combination, this specific week in April 2026, when the ground shook and the advisory went active, and then, 2 days later, the mountain started to burn. The Disaster Relief Act is now invoked for both situations. The seismic emergency response that followed Monday's earthquake and the wildfire emergency that erupted Wednesday. The same law, the same mechanism, the same national financial backstop, activated twice in 72 hours for the same prefecture. That has happened before in Japan's long history of catastrophe. But it has rarely happened simultaneously. 2 active emergencies, 2 formal disaster declarations, 1 community, 1 week. The systems are functioning, the helicopters are flying. The fire departments from across Iwate are holding lines. The self-defense forces are deployed. The JMA's monitoring instruments continue transmitting from the ocean floor and the mountainside simultaneously, watching for the next signal in a sequence that is not finished. What the data cannot tell you. What no instrument on Earth can tell you, not the seismographs on the ocean floor of the Japan Trench, not the atmospheric sensors tracking the blocking high-pressure system above the Kitakami Mountains, not the smoke cameras watching the fire front advance by the minute, is when this ends. Not when the fire is suppressed, though that too is uncertain. When the system stops loading. When the coastline gets a season without catastrophe. When the people of Otsuchi get to have an ordinary April, the kind where the worst thing that happens is late snow, or a cold wind off the ocean, or a fishing boat that needs a repair. When the wind phone on the hill above town is visited by pilgrims who come to speak to people lost in 2011, and not by people newly displaced from the fire on the slope above it. The seismic energy stored in the Japan Trench has been accumulating since 2011. It releases in increments, a magnitude 6. 8 in November, a magnitude 7. 6 in December, a magnitude 7. 5 in April. And the question of whether those increments are releasing the stored energy gradually or preparing the fault for something larger is the question that no seismologist on Earth can currently answer with certainty. The monitoring is in place, the detection is real, and the prediction, the thing that people sleeping in gymnasiums in Otsuchi most need, remains, as it has always been on this coast, just beyond the edge of what science can provide. The fire is still burning, the advisory is still active, the ground is still shaking.